Buenos dias. Welcome back to another episode of the Bamboo Season Podcast. I'm your host, sober wellness coach Dorian Warmsley, the podcast where me and my guests share stories of transformation, resilience, growth to leave you inspired and motivated to change your life, to be great, and to stop fucking around. My guest today is a licensed naturopathic doctor. I'll bring you Julia Britz. I'm just going to let you do your own intro and tell us what you do and stuff. But hi, Julia.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks. We met at an event. Shout out to Desert Moon Wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Janelle and Corey, they had an event. You're friends with the amazing Deanna.
Yeah.
I love Deanna. She just great spirit and soul.
Mm-hmm.
Always get a good sense of calm.
I know.
And when I just see her give her a hug and everything, like it was so great to see her. And then she introduced me to you.
Yeah.
You're her friend. And when I asked you what you did, you said you were a hippie doctor.
I did say that.
Yeah. So that intrigued me. So I'm like, okay, interesting. What is that about? And what does that mean? So if you can give us a little breakdown of, you know, who you are and what you do, who you help.
Yeah. So basically, I'm a naturopathic doctor, which means that I help people with their health holistically, meaning I look at the whole person. I'm looking at things like how are you eating, how are you sleeping, how are you feeling, and I'm trying to prevent chronic disease before it starts. But my main focus is actually mental health. So I'm trying to help people solve their mental health issues naturally. So a lot of people see me because they want to get off psych meds or they're trying to avoid getting started on them. And so I had that passion for mental health because I had so many struggles with my own. And when I got better, I just felt like it was kind of my responsibility. I was like, I have to help people do this because I grew up with that mindset that so many people have, which is you either can take a pill or go to therapy and that's it. And that could not be further from the truth. So enter Julia.
And then, so you're an actual doctor. Mm-hmm. Where did you study at? How was your schooling? All that.
So I went to S.O.B.R.I.E.T.Y University and I got my doctorate there in naturopathic medicine. It's a 4-year program and I licensed in the state of Arizona. And it's for me, I did that after I got my post-bachelorate, which was in organic chemistry before that. And that's because my undergrad was actually in arts and I had a minor in Native American studies. So
interesting.
I know, right? So I was like, well, okay, this is not going to work because you have to have all these classes to go to med school to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And so mine was art and politics. It wasn't science. So I had to do quite a lot of education to go back and study, you know, learning all this, the stuff that I just didn't learn, you know, things that I avoided like physics. Yeah.
Oh.
Which I still don't have a love for. But that was in California. It's actually 8, maybe 7 now. But at the time, there were 8 schools for naturopathic medicine in North America. And so I'd always loved California. So I was like, well, I got to go there. So
with the Native American studies, I'm sure you learned some cool stuff.
Yeah. It's, I mean, for me, I was always really passionate about the disenfranchised people of society. And I've always cared about the little guy and the underdog and the people that were, you know, that had a long way to go to catch up. And so, and also growing up in Washington, we were surrounded by a lot of different tribes. And I really love the culture, the art, and I dated a couple Native boys. And so for me, like I got exposed to like this whole other side of, you know, Americana culture. And so I guess like that's what drew me into it. I just started taking all these classes and they're like, you know, you're really close to getting a minor in this. You should just keep going. And I was like, okay. And the politics were really interesting. And I found there's so much interesting, and it kind of bridges what I do now. Cause I'm, like I was saying, I help people come off psychiatric medication. And so that means like a lot of people are dealing with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, OCD, suicidal ideation. And some of the groups that are most affected by suicidal ideation and behavior are Indigenous people. And especially Indigenous men, you know, by a huge margin compared to women. So I think there's just too many people that are just, you know, part of our society that just don't get adequate care. And mental health is always on the back burner anyway. So.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they have one of the highest rates of alcoholism.
Yeah.
Are Native Americans.
Yeah, and in America, alcohol abuse is really high, and not everybody has the exact genetic makeup to metabolize that very well.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a case. Now, indigenous groups around the world, that's not always the case, and every culture seems to have sort of a drug of choice. You know what they can go for, what's accessible. Like some other cultures, you know, it's butane, you know, gasoline. Which is not good for you. So yeah, unfortunately, alcohol is a pretty common one. And I mean, it's heartbreaking because it's sort of like, what else are you going to do in a way? Like if you're living in a place that's very isolating, and most reservations are, you know, there's a huge difference between being on a res and being off a res. And so financial situations are very difficult. Most of the time it's a food desert. It's like really hard to eat. And especially like if you want to eat your native diet, but you can't grow there, like that's a huge problem, you know, culturally, ethically, and spiritually. That's just a big problem. So incorporating the Western diet to people that are not necessarily used to it, it's going to cause a lot of problems like obesity, diabetes, heart disease.
There's a gentleman named Peter Santinello. Are you familiar?
Mm-mm.
He has a YouTube channel where he goes to all over the country, different cities, and talks to the people. Like, hey, how is it here? What's going on? Like, and it's interesting because he goes to everywhere. I mean, he has a video going into the very hood depths of Compton with the gang members, talking to them. You know, it's all these black dudes and it's this white guy with the camera, and they're welcoming him, showing him their life, how it is.
Yeah.
But he does that in very just random cities and places like Gary, Indiana, the Appalachia area. So meeting people who live in Virginia and these small towns of places, the furthest town in Maine. And he went to some reservation places, and he went to some that where you have to be invited.
Mm-hmm.
So he's there and he's just showing their lifestyle, and, you know, some of the natives are talking to him and expressing the things that go on there. And it's back to a lot of points you made of just the food situation, crime, alcohol, and it's almost like crabs in a barrel situation there. It's very unfortunate and sad to see.
Wow.
Yeah, but great YouTube channel if you ever want to check it out and get lost. I get lost all the time. And
I know.
I remember the time I was dating a girl and I told her I was watching that. She was like, what? Like, thought I was a weird. I'm like, yeah, I guess it is kind of weird, but you get to learn about different people in different places because we can get so used to where we're at and where we live.
I know.
Or what we see on social media. We don't know about these little small towns and people who live so different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I spent most of my time on the West Coast and a little bit on the East. I virtually have no idea of what it's like to live in the middle of the country.
Me either.
Which is so crazy to think about because, like, I know it's culturally so different. Like, statistically, it's so different. Like, for example, you and I can go to Sprouts or Whole Foods in 2 seconds, but there's so many people that's not even around. Like, driving to any grocery store is an ordeal, you know? So, yeah, it's just, to me, it's kind of it's on my list just to do a big road trip.
Same. I would love to do it from here.
Yeah.
All the way across in the back. I really want to go to like Wyoming, Montana, those areas and see South Dakota, North Dakota, all those places. Not so much. Sorry, they're going to probably watch this if they're out there, but don't stop subscribing if you are from that city. So let's go back to you, Miss Julia. So naturopathic doctor, AKA hippie doctor, what got you into wanting to go that route?
Well, I was always like a really anxious kid, and it seemed like it was just sort of one health problem after another. Nothing really serious, but just something that was really always affecting my ability to sleep or to feel comfortable or to be, you know, willing or happy to make friends. I was just like always dealing with either stomach aches or sleep problems or nightmares or, you know, whatever it was. And then when I got older, it seemed like that just got more intense and honestly kind of more demented, like in terms of just how everything was escalating. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't eat anything without getting sick. So once I kind of knew something was wrong, I tried all these different things, and it got to the point where I was like, nothing's really helping. I was prescribed Ativan for anxiety. I was also getting really bad OCD at the time. And so for me, I was self-medicating a lot with alcohol. And so
popping pills.
I know,
alcohol.
Right? Yeah. And at the time, like I was in San Diego and it was really easy to go to Mexico and just get whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing because I got, I tried Ativan and I thought, wow, this is
It helped.
what it feels like to be normal. Like, this is amazing. And I just fell in love as much as anyone can fall in love with anything. And so I just started going to Mexico and just getting as much as I could. And then any pharmacy that wouldn't sell it, I'd be like, well, what can you sell me? And then I started getting like Flexeril and Soma. Like, it didn't matter. I was like, I'll take all of it. And so for a while, it really was managing a lot of my symptoms and anxiety and OCD. But the more I used, the more it seemed like these flares of OCD would be extra scary. And so I was going from being really numb to being really anxious to panic to really not really. And so it didn't really resolve the underlying issue. It was just me trying to put a Band-Aid, but I was doing my best. I was just trying to survive. And so at that point, it kind of changed where I was like, okay, it used to be I was managing, and then it was, all right, I think it's now recreational because I was canceling plans with friends. I would rather just go home and get high than do anything else. And I didn't want people to ruin that, So, and that was fine till it wasn't fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't fine after a while. I was like, I got like a DUI and, that kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, oh no, this is really serious now. And I was, making poor choices and like just getting into trouble and stuff and having issues. And so it got to the point where I was like, I think I gotta stop doing this. But the problem is like, if you take away the crutch and you don't have any tools, then all you've done is congratulations on the behavior of not using, but you're still suffering, without anything to help. So at that point it was, and I had dealt with some traumatic things too in my 20s, and I just wasn't aware to deal with that. So I started self-harming, and I was really promiscuous, and I was, I restricted food because that was giving me an endorphin rush. I didn't know that was what it was doing, but that's what it was doing.
Restricting your food?
Yeah. So when you don't eat, your body sends endorphins to like kind of get you up to go hunt. So the problem is like that can get really addictive. You're like, oh, I feel kind of good in a weird way, even though I'm hungry. And so I was living off that. So needless to say, it was not going great. It wasn't going great. But luckily I found an ND or a doctor. She wasn't ND like license wise, but she was a holistic doctor. And I went to see her because I was like, look, I have all these problems and I'm getting sick all the time and like I can't eat anything and whatever. And so she did something called bioresonance with me, which is a type of bioenergetic testing. And it was kind of amazing because she knew all the stuff I didn't tell her. Like she said, well, you've really bad OCD. It looks like you got a parasite and, it looks like you're not sleeping. And I was like, yeah. And she said, well, do you want, we can work on that stuff. But I'd always thought like OCD was only managed with psychiatric medication. And I was like, no, it's okay. Like I already know that it's okay. And she's like, no, you don't, we can do stuff for that. And I was like, okay. So I left with like $500 worth of supplements. And I'm just like, whoa, I am my mother. Cause like when I grew up, she had a wicker basket of supplements on the fridge. And so I was like, I'm never doing that. It's like when you're a kid, you like pick these weird qualities. And then when you're older, you're like, shouldn't have focused on avoiding those. I should have worked on the big ones, like saying I love you and like not running away from a fight. But anyway, so it worked though. It worked so well to just actually give my body the nutrition it needed, because so many people, I think, that especially that struggle with alcohol abuse, like don't realizing that they're also trying to regulate blood sugar. They're also trying to regulate like an endorphin imbalance or a dopamine deficiency. Like, and so that it does work in the moment. So once I started getting those nutrients to correct that, all of a sudden my body was like, actually, we don't need the alcohol so much anymore. And we don't really need all this other stuff so much anymore. And the intrusive thoughts went away. Everything just got so much better. And I was euphoric, which was amazing. And so I said, how do I do this? And she's like, go be an ND and go to school and do it.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I will. Yeah, here we are.
That's amazing. When you think back, was there anything that happened growing up that caused all this anxiety and OCD at such a young age?
I think it was just like for so many people, OCD, there's really no substantial evidence to say that there's a single gene that will manifests itself as OCD. Yeah, sure, there might be an MTHFR situation, but that's really more like a risk factor versus an actual, genetic diagnostic criteria that would have to happen. So I find that for me and most people, it was a combination of childhood trauma with something physiological going on. And usually the trauma revolves around your parents trying to get you to be perfect or letting you know it's not okay to make a mistake in any way. And so, and trying to also be like a people pleaser, like make sure everybody's really happy. But I was self-harming really young.
Really?
Like, yeah, when I was like 8 or so, I started like, can I say that? What I could.
Yeah, somebody needs to hear it.
Yeah, so when I was really young, I would take computer cords and I just would whip myself because like I felt so guilty for every bad thought I was having.
Wow, at 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. And so we weren't even like religious. It wasn't like an atonement thing, but I did just sort of grow up feeling like I had to not make any mistakes, and I really wanted to make my parents happy. And I think that in whatever way they tried their best, like parents always try their best, but I think they were both very selfish in their own ways. My mom had PTSD, and so I saw the world through her eyes, which was sheer terror and total distrust and paranoia. And my dad, he moved out when I was, pretty young as well. So I really didn't have like a dad figure around as much. So I think just that kind of dynamic, especially for me, just being a naturally sensitive little kid and like seeing my mom be so scared and panicked of everything, I just think I grabbed onto that and was like, I want her to feel better. I'm scared for her. And she sees that as dangerous. It probably is. And, I think you combine that with a kid who just probably had, I swear I had blood sugar issues growing up too, because I just got so scared and food to me was really stimulating. So I didn't want to eat. And a lot of kids that are anxious are picky eaters, or they get or like whatever else is going on where they just get sensitive to taste, texture, or that kind of thing, and they don't eat. If you're not eating enough, your blood sugar is going to be all over the place. So I think those combinations kind of.
It's almost like you mimicked your mom's personality in a sense. Took it on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it was, as one of my therapists put it, she's like, you had PTSD by proxy. Like you were raised to have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Damn. It's almost like, is it almost like a hypochondriac?
Yeah, it felt a lot like that.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Damn, that's interesting. That's one word I need to stop saying so much. I've been catching myself.
Interesting?
Yeah. Because I've been on this journey of becoming a better speaker and communication.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple classes and meetings and stuff, and that too, right there, stuff where the coach, gives us information of how to become better and all these different tactics.
Yeah.
And filler words that we use, that stuff and things. So I catch myself sometimes, and I'm trying to get better at correcting it. And I was explaining this to a friend recently, and I said sometimes when we're speaking, we say stuff and things rather than giving it an actual description. Mm-hmm. Yes. Like, what do you do for work? Oh, well, I help people with natural medicine and stuff.
And stuff.
No, not and stuff. What sometimes we don't share or don't think enough, I guess. I don't know. We're just lazy. I don't know.
No, totally. Like, I see that in medicine too, So it's really tempting to say, like, hey, what's stressing you out? Or, like, I'm so stressed. But stress is a really vague word. Yeah. And it doesn't mean a lot, because you can apply it to literally too many things for it to have any real meaning anymore. To me, a better question is, like, what are you afraid of? Because that's really what stress is. Like, stress is causing a fear response in the body. So, like, what is it? And that will give you a better answer.
That was fire.
Thanks.
That was like ChatGPT.
Oh my God, stop.
Those are the kind of questions you got to ask it. Like,
I know.
You got to get in depth. You can't just say, hey, I don't stop stress. You got to.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm going to use that. That was good.
It's more vulnerable too to say what you're afraid of. Because especially in our culture, like, we don't really like to say feelings that much. We'll just say, like, it's more of like what we're thinking, actually. Like, so for example, I could say, like, I'm feeling a little nervous because I have a need for integrity. And so, like, when you didn't show up, like, that bothered me. Like, that's a bigger thing to say to somebody than, like, why didn't you show up? It's not cool. like that doesn't tell them anything about how that affected me, you know? That's all Marshall Rosenberg stuff. He wrote Nonviolent Communication, but he was amazing. Have you heard of him?
What's the name again?
Marshall Rosenberg.
Maybe.
Yeah, so I think he just passed away not too long ago, but he wrote a book called Nonviolent Communication. And he had these schools set up, like he had, I think, 6 in Israel, 5 in Palestine, and all over the world. So he has worked with, warring tribes, governments, individuals, couples. And the whole thing was, how do we teach people to communicate in our natural way, which is a compassionate way, versus what we've been taught, which is more like a way of punition. Like, you're right or wrong, you're good or bad. And if whatever you've done, you will be rewarded or punished. And we see that all the time. Like when people talk like politics, they'll be like, well, I don't like this person. Well, this person did it worse. It's just blame.
That's gaslighting.
Yeah, that too. So it's silly because it's like, we're not getting into the real stuff about like the fact that most people are feeling these things all the time and we need to talk about them. Because also like it's a vulnerable thing. That's hard to do. But we'll get further if we do it, I think.
No, I agree. I think vulnerability is very important. I think a lot of our lack of wanting to become vulnerable can come from, honestly, what we think. We're so worried about what other people think of us. Mm-hmm. How it's going to make me look, how it's going to make me, they're going to judge me, they're going to think I'm this, think I'm that. When in reality, nobody really cares about you. Mm-hmm. Not to be mean, but it's like I was doing Pilates the other day. And I was just thinking about that. Like I was struggling, fighting for my life, the certain move, and I'm looking around. Other people are fighting for their lives too. And it made me think, I'm like, when people say they don't want to go to the gym, work out, they're worried about being, I'm telling you, I promise, nobody is sitting there looking at you like, look how dumb this person looks. I know, right? I've never met nobody like that. Yeah. I never thought that. I have been to a gym and I had a guy like, damn, bro, you have too much cologne. Like,
I think that too.
Why are you here?
I know.
Or the guy standing in front of the dumbbell rack and in the mirror doing curls. Like, bro, we have to put stuff. Why are you in the way? But little tangent. But back to what we were saying of if people started to understand and realize others truly don't care what you got going on, to a certain extent within context. But I believe the vulnerability is what makes us connect more. Because you even just sharing right there about 8 years old, self-harming, that's vulnerable. Somebody's going to watch this and feel connected and feel like, damn, Dr. Julia Britz too? I'm not the only one. I'm not tripping.
Yeah, you're not.
And they don't got to stay stuck in that shame or guilt or, so worried. Easier said than done. Yeah. But I do wish more people would get open to the idea of being more vulnerable and open with what they've been through, who they are, what they think.
Yeah, it's more attractive, in terms of
yeah. That's why you think I do this podcast and tell my story. You think to help people? I'm trying to help attract my wife. And I'm just kidding.
But it's true though. Like, it's like, and actually my friend asked the other day, she's like, what exactly is vulnerability? And I was like, well, to me, it's when you do or say something or behave in a way that requires bravery, meaning that it's like you could, like, for example, if I share something that's not hard to say, that's not really vulnerable. I'm just talking. But if it's like, if it requires a little bit of bravery, meaning I have to muster up some sort of internal strength of my heart, that's vulnerable. And that's going to look different for everybody. Because like, it might be easy for someone to say, I love you for the first time because like, I don't care. For somebody else, it might be literally the most vulnerable thing they could do and be really difficult. And then there could be a mismatch if they don't understand that. But to me, that's how I define it.
I really wish I could pinpoint where I heard it. It was more recent. I was listening to a podcast where he broke down vulnerability and he said, similar to what you said, he's like, when you're willing to say something that can possibly be judged.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So me saying something about myself, I know I can be judged if I say Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people are going to, I can get pulled apart, but I'm vulnerable enough, I guess courageous also enough, maybe delusional, but willing to say that.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's why I love listening to podcasts, man. You get even some where I think like, I'm not going to get anything from this. And I'll listen. I'm like, oh. I just love hearing other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Because everybody has different experiences. Like, I never lived where you lived and did what you did. So there's definitely something Yeah. So I need to hear about it, Julia.
Yeah.
So you dealt with your own OCD, your own anxiety, your own. What else did you say you had?
I had self-harm, disordered
Self-harm,
eating.
yeah. So you said you don't recall any specific trauma as a kid besides the PTSD you kind of inherited from your mother, it seemed.
Yeah.
And then you said in your 20s there was some trauma that occurred.
Yeah.
Are you want to open to share that?
Sure.
What was...
I had I was sexually assaulted at a bar, and
in San Diego.
Yeah, and it was the worst thing ever. But the worst thing ever was what happened after, which was because my husband at the time was outside. And so like I ran to go get him, and I was bawling my eyes out. I was also kind of stunned. I was like kind of all over the place. But I tried to tell him what happened, and he said, "Why did you let that happen?" And I immediately felt so much guilt. And I was like, "Oh my God, why did I let that happen?" And I just felt so much shame. So to me, that was worse than anything else that had happened to me. And I spent a year in therapy with a therapist who I don't think was fully equipped to handle that. So we spent a long time trying to work on, getting my husband's forgiveness, which I think fed the shame, like implying that like I did something wrong, which is not true for any woman. So it wasn't until literally years later that someone pointed out to me and said, this wasn't your fault, right? No one had said that to me. I hadn't told many people, but that was what shook everything up. And I was like, oh my God, like I had no idea. So I carried that wound for a long time. 'Cause that's also what started, like my self-harm really worsened. I, was drinking a ton and everything. All that kind of started after that. So I was diagnosed at the time with borderline, and it wasn't until years later.
What?
Borderline personality disorder, which is a very stigmatized mental health disorder where, people tend to have an unstable sense of self. They tend to self-harm, a lot of turmoil in interpersonal relationships, and a lot of emotional dysregulation. And all that was true. But it wasn't until years later when I had a therapist say, if this happens after a trauma, that's not borderline, that's PTSD. But women are notoriously diagnosed with borderline because of very sexist reasons. Because the difference is actually pretty minor. Like, for example, if somebody had been traumatized because they were maybe abandoned, which is a big fear with borderlines of being abandoned, and let's just say they start self-harming, that could really look like borderline, even though it's, see what I'm saying? It's kind of a mix. But if someone's a man, they'll get the PTSD diagnosis. And then if they're a woman, they'll get the BPD one. But treatment I find to be pretty much the same. It should be trauma-informed therapies, either somatic or CBT or something like that. So yeah, that was quite a journey. And I had a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of forgiveness work around that one. So that was a long time ago, but it wasn't for years till I kind of heard someone say, oh, this is actually PTSD. And that for me was healing, because it was like, oh, wait a second. Like, we never dealt with the trauma properly. Like, it went actually very left. So then once we did deal with it properly, there was a lot more healing that happened. Because there was a time I couldn't say this out loud without having a panic attack.
Wow.
And I didn't tell most people in my life. And if I did feel like I had to tell somebody, it would just result in a panic attack and a week of drinking, because I just couldn't do it. It was too much. And, because you're reliving it a little bit when you do that. So, yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So you're at the bar with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Where...
He had gone outside to get air or smoke a cigarette or something.
In that little window of time, some guy, whatever, I don't want to relive it for you, but...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And how long after did you guys divorce?
Next day? We actually...
Still together?
No.
Oh. I was like, you're a forgiving person, boy. You really healed.
I know, right now.
Whoa.
We actually had gotten married a month after that. So... Yeah. And
So you guys were engaged at the time. That happens. You guys get married a month later.
Yeah. And because I had so much shame that I was like, I hope he still wants to marry me.
Wow.
Yeah. But we got divorced 2 years later after that. So we were not together very long.
And at what point did you started to get the healing sense of like, it's not your fault? It was
after we were divorced.
Oh, so for 2 years you were carrying around this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, I think my therapist was so set on the whole, this is borderline and like, don't worry, he'll forgive you. It just kind of fed this whole story that I'd believed that like, oh wow, like I can't believe I let this happen. And I was dissecting it every which way about like if I wore something different, if I was sitting somewhere else, like everything I looked at for 2 years, So it was such a blessing when someone said like, hey, this wasn't your fault. Because that rocked my world for months. And honestly, though, it's so true. Like there's so many women that will share their stories with me and they'll say, so like this happened and I didn't scream because I felt this way, and they feel they need to explain why they didn't defend themselves or explain why they let it happen. And it's such a common thing, and I have to interrupt every time just because I learned that. Like, look, you went into freeze. You can't help it. Like, and it's not up to you. Like, it's not. Like, it's too scary. It's too overwhelming. Your body shuts down. You're trying not to make anything worse happen. So it's, I think, just such a common, unfortunate part of our culture that like women still feel the need to like excuse the event as if they played a role in it in that way. So.
Damn.
Yeah, I know, heavy.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I'm glad you've been able to get through that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is a big deal for me to even talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, because it took a long time to get there, and for me, I don't even meet the criteria for PTSD anymore. Like, I don't self-harm. I, have a very stable sense of self. I don't have nightmares anymore. Like, I don't have flashbacks anymore. Like, all that stuff is really gone. It's still, part of my story. It's a chapter. But, I can say, like, yeah, I had a traumatic experience, but I don't say I have PTSD because I don't. I don't have a disordered perception of what happened. I actually have a very clear perception of what happened now because I've done a lot of healing work for that. But I also think, for me, I use that to help inform me as a doctor because most of my patients have trauma. And a lot of them have a tough past. And I know how hard it is to talk about it. I know how scary it is to tell someone who's also a doctor. Because it's scary to think that this person who has sort of like this hierarchy thing with you, like the one up, which I don't like, are they going to judge me? Are they going to think I'm too much? Are they going to fire me? Are they going to like send me to a psych ward? Which is the scariest thing for people. And the worst thing too, like if someone says they have suicidal thinking, like the worst place they can go is somewhere that they feel trapped, which is usually like psych, and I've been 5150, like it's horrible. So sometimes necessary, but I argue there should be two ways we talk about that. Like I always tell my patients, like, look, I don't have a magic button under my desk. Like I'm not here to like call police to come and nab you and like kidnap you and take you somewhere. Like there's a difference between like, hey, I'm really upset. I have a plan and I have a way to act on it and I'm probably going to do it and nothing's holding me back. That's different from like, I just feel hopeless and I've got dark fantasy, but I don't really ever want to act on it, but I'm just really, really sad and alone and hopeless. Like very different, and they need to be treated differently too.
So the people who come see you, are there people who are, or is there a point where you're like, you probably need to go see a therapist?
Yeah, and I recommend. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, as opposed to like maybe they share theirs is very heavy, and you're like, okay, I can help you, but I really think it's best you see a therapist or.
Yeah, it's. I usually recommend therapy quite often because whether or not therapy is gonna solve something physiological, but I find that naturopathic medicine and therapy work so well together because it's hard for someone to sit in therapy when their nervous system's on fire. And they can barely handle it because they are sweating like crazy, their heart's pounding, and everything's in them screaming to run away. Like, it's not going to work. Like it just can't. So naturopathic support can be great. Let's work on nutrition and some supplements to see if we can help calm the nervous system down a little bit, like get the adrenal system more regulated, help the pituitary to signal everything properly so that you can actually handle someone like, hey, like let's talk about that. So I find that together it's a pretty dynamic combo, especially for OCD, because people will say like, well, is the OCD psychological or physiological? And it's probably both. So let's just say it's physiological, and let's just say it's like a nutrient deficiency or whatnot, and we're fixing that. That person, though, still will probably benefit from therapy because the thoughts may go away. The intrusive thinking and the anxiety-provoking thoughts, that'll go down. But if you spent years compulsing, and you psychologically train yourself to compulse whenever you get anxious, that habit's going to be harder to break. And that's more psychological. So that's where therapy can be helpful to learn through DBT, ACT, CBT. Hey, how do I process and sit with feelings versus feel the need to do something compulsive or repetitive?
What about ADD and ADHD? Do you talk to people with that?
Yeah, no, ADD is really interesting because it's traditionally ADHD is considered a diagnosis that means you have to have symptoms that begin in early childhood, like before age 12. The diagnosis changed a lot over the years. For a while, you couldn't diagnose somebody with it, like that had autism. You could, and it was all over the place. And then it kind of changed to where people started thinking like, well, I'm getting ADHD symptoms for the first time in menopause, so I have ADHD. Or I'm getting ADHD symptoms after a concussion. Those are not necessarily ADHD per se. Even if you have those symptoms of you can't focus and you're anxious and you got time blindness and all that kind of stuff, it's valid, but we don't necessarily always want to put a disorder name on top of that, because the treatment's different. Like, for example, most kids with ADHD have issues with their dopamine systems and their epinephrine system. So for them, they might do really well on stimulants, like stimulant medications, for example, which I don't recommend all the time. But
Adderall.
Yeah. Like it's, and research shows that the second you go off it, you're back to where you were. It's not curing anything, but it might make your life a little bit more palatable for a while. So that, though, if someone had a concussion, maybe the worst thing you could do. Like give someone a stimulant? No, bad idea. So it really depends like what you mean. So when someone comes in and they're like, I have ADHD, I'd say, what do you mean by that? Why, when it starts? Because that tells me a lot about which direction we need to go to support the brain. Because either way, I know that person's miserable, but we need to know why.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine mention it to me. She thinks I have it. And I think it was like, the saying of like, you don't see a certain object until you talk about it.
Object permanence.
So like, let's say you buy a red Jeep and all of a sudden you see red Jeeps all the time.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Object permanence. It's the opposite of what you said. It's when like something goes away so you think it doesn't exist.
Oh.
So it's like, for example, when you're a child and they move a ball and you're like, it's gone, or like your mom's gone. And it actually happens to people with ADHD now, or people with ADHD and anxious attachment disorder. They like when their partner goes away because of the time blindness and because of that panic, they're like, they're not coming back. I'm being abandoned. And like, it's sort of like this adult version of object permanence. Sorry.
Interesting.
You go.
No, not that. But from what the other part, when she had brought it to my attention.
Yes.
I was like, do I? I'm like, no, I never thought about it, because we were talking about something as a group of friends at a hookah spot.
Yeah.
And as we're talking, I look over and I see like this big gold hookah, and I was like, we're like in mid conversation. I'm like, I wonder if if they smoked that big hookah. Like it just, and then she was like, oh, you have ADD. I'm like, I don't think so, but it might have triggered it in me, because then I started thinking about it more.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I do or not, but there's times where my attention span is just, like I'll be, even when I work out sometimes, I'm supposed to be counting when I work out, and I'll just be like 12, 13, 16. I'm like, how many did I just do?
You're like probably 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I got to think about it.
Yeah. Well, really, that's actually a good point about this. So disorder, like you could say like I have attention and deficit issues, focus issues, anxiety issues. When it becomes a disorder is when it disrupts your quality of life enough to where you're like, I got to do something about this. Because everyone's got a little bit of like obsessive compulsive tendencies and a little ADD tendencies. We do. That's just what makes personality. But when it crosses that line of like, I can't function anymore, then we go, okay, now we're talking disorder and we should talk about treatment or what we can do to help.
Yeah, they put me on Ritalin when I was in kindergarten.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
And my mom was like, of course he's hyper. He's a 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Miss Kelly. Well, she was old back then. And this is what, 95, 96?
Yeah.
30 plus years. She's probably not with us no more.
Wow.
I would assume, because she was Miss Kelly. Oh, she was you know what, bro? I remember her like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You can remember certain teachers. And I remember all my teachers, but the memory's a crazy thing sometimes.
Right.
Miss Kelly, I remember. Oh, yeah.
You
So
were a
that
little kid.
they had to switch me classes. So I had to go to Mr. Marsh's class next door because I was hyper and all this stuff. And I'm like, bro, I'm a kid.
Yeah.
5. You just sit in the corner and
Yeah.
fucking eat paste?
Seriously. And plus, like, there's so many, I've heard so many psychiatrists say, like, well, give the kids Adderall or Ritalin, like, when they're in school and they get a summer break, a washout period. I'm like, is it really a disorder then if they get a break from treatment? If they're only triggered in one environment? Like, that's really interesting, you know? And I met a guy, he ran like a nonprofit where it was called Pencils for something, but he basically helped create like school resource situations for kids in Africa, like get them tools and stuff. But he was telling me a lot of schools were outside, and he's like, yeah, they sit outside and the kids like do cartwheels and they're listening to teachers and stuff like that. And I thought that would be incredible. Like, it's kind of cruel to put kids in a box, like with fluorescent lighting and being like, do not sit anywhere else. Like, don't talk, don't make noise, be absolutely silent, pay complete attention to someone who's really boring, and do that for 8 hours. Like, I can't do that as an adult. Like,
I saw a post about that, and it was like a timeline of events, and it was like they're prepping you to become factory workers.
so they are.
Or jail.
Yes.
Because when I went to jail, oh boy, it's like adult school.
It is.
You get up at 4:30 a.m. You
man.
eat. You go back to your cell. You wake up again. You eat. All in line. Don't talk. Don't do this. Shower now. It reminded me when I remember I was in there thinking about it, I'm like, bro, this is really like just adult criminal
Yeah.
school. And then you have one guy watching the whole thing. He's pretty much getting paid X amount of money just to babysit a bunch of, adults who are in trouble.
Right?
But it makes sense, when you think about that as a kid, how our school was compared to people who grew up and then work in. Well, now I think that things have changed. Back in way before our times, it was factory work and stuff like that. You work in those places. It's literally that. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. They are outside. I mean, it's unfortunate kind of in a way. We have AC and all that. They're probably hot as shit. But, it's the difference.
I mean, yeah. Like, I remember in college, I would go to my teachers and say, like, hey, I'm going to listen. I do listen, but I can't listen just, like, in a chair. So I'm going to be standing up. You'll probably see me twiddling with my hair. Like, I just have to do something to listen. And even now, like, if I have to listen to, like, a lecture, like, I will tune out and daydream like crazy unless I'm playing video games at the same time. Then I can hear it perfectly. But I have to do something with my hands and, like, look at something else. Sorry. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So, like, and I don't have ADHD. So I imagine how hard it is for people that do have it. You know what I mean?
I think also people and teachers in any field, teachers, coaches, instructors, they should do more work on themselves of how to become better presenters, better communicators. Because there's probably certain people you've probably heard throughout your life who communicate so well to where you'll listen to them read a child book.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, where it's information you need.
Yeah.
But that person just can't get it to you besides like being so like the Clear Eyes guy.
Yeah.
Imagine
I had a teacher just like that.
Imagine him teaching you how to be a naturopathic doctor, how much that would be hard for you. And I don't know, I can't speak for all instructors or teachers or anything like that, but I think that's something we're missing in the world, not just school, anything.
Yeah.
Jobs. Bro, I've worked jobs where I've sit there through a whole course training. You're like, bro, I'm not listening. Like,
oh, it's so
fuck
true.
No.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to I don't know anything about that, like how to teach or whatever, but I guess I would say teaching is a part of naturopathic medicine. Like,
communication.
Yeah, and I'm trying to tell people, like, hey, when your body does this, it means this. Like, and I love it when patients are like, guess what, Dr. B? Like, I felt this coming on, so I knew you said that, so I took this supplement, and I'm like, you are becoming your own doctor, like your own best doctor, and that's the whole point. Because like we should not be so like disconnected from ourselves that we need someone else to tell us how we are. You know what I mean? Like that's just no. So I love teaching people about like, hey, like this is what you can do. This is what your feelings mean. Because some women come in, they're like, ovulate. I don't know if I'm ovulating. Other women are like, I know exactly the second it happens. I can tell because they're so body aware.
Yeah.
But if you're, you're dealing with mental health issues, you're trying to run from your feelings and you're trying to escape everything because probably as a child, your feelings and needs weren't really met. You learned that asking didn't help. So you just learned to run away and self-medicate. And that means that becoming self-aware is a journey. Like you're like, okay, well, how do I do that where it's not going to feel terrifying to me? But that's honestly the funnest part of my job is helping people feel like, hey, it's actually cool when your body starts to wake up and you go, oh, this means that. This means that. Yeah. Ole.
I think we can't avoid we got to try not to avoid the not so good feelings. Yeah. I think sometimes we believe we need to feel good all the time. So then when things don't go our way and it's stressful or it's uncomfortable, we kind of shy away from it and think it's so negative. Mm-hmm. I've come to learn that's part of it, and the highs aren't always going to be there for as long. Mm-hmm. So neither are the lows. Mm-hmm. I'm somebody that's not super over. I heard a woman break this down so perfectly. I never knew how to explain it. I thought I was the only one. She's a former CIA agent, I believe, or Secret Service. Her name is Evie something. She's a Greek lady, blonde hair. I saw her on a podcast. And she was saying how her personality type, she's not over emotional with the highs or the lows. Because then when that happens, you're now relying on external things to almost control your emotions. Like, celebrate yourself, be good that you did certain things, but you don't need to live in it so much and make it part of your identity. Because on the flip side, when things go so bad, now you're down here and unable. And I was like, damn, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Because there's certain things that have happened in my life where I started to feel guilty. Like, damn, I should be celebrating myself.
Yeah.
Because other people will say it. Like, I'm happy and I feel good that these things that have happened, but I don't overdo it to where it's like, oh my God, yeah, let's go. It's everything. Because then if it goes back the other way, I'm going to tumble down and feel, oh man, why not me?
It's true. Like, because, I think when I was in active addiction, like everything was a high or low. There was nothing in this middle range. It was just like, I need to feel so much better. And then be like numbed into oblivion. Like that was it. Because for me, like I thought the opposite of like chaos was boredom, which was really scary because like most people with anxiety hate boredom because it just means your thoughts can creep in there. But then I learned the opposite of chaos was actually peace. And now I'm obsessed. Like all I want is that kind of peace. Like I enjoy it so much. Like for me, it was like, okay, and how do we find that? So I started looking at like all these like religious texts, because I was trying to figure out like, how are they doing it? Because again, didn't grow up religious. But a lot of them really point to compassionate living, in terms of joy and how do you get there through gratitude and forgiveness. Like it's all over the place. Forgive. Like, nope, he does not forgive. And so I was like, okay, how do you forgive then? Because that's a word we throw around. And I don't think we use it correctly. Like we use it to mean like to forgive, to excuse. That's not what it means at all. Like to forgive is to unchain yourself from trauma. That's what it is. So if we can understand that, it becomes something we're more willing to want to do versus like, no, I'm the judge of the jury and I have to hold them accountable in the Supreme Court of the cosmos. It's a big job.
Yeah.
So that changes everything. And if you can, at least for me, and what I've seen help my patients too, like the more you can forgive, the more you practice gratitude, the more you can feel sustainable joy, which to me is more rewarding than fleeting happiness because that doesn't last that long. So.
And you've been able to forgive yourself?
And I mean, yes and no. So yes, in the sense that like, I continuously practice it because it's a practice. Yeah. So like, cause some days I'm like, feeling good, forgive, let it go. And then all of a sudden I'll have a realization and something new will pop up and there's a new layer to something that happened in the past. And I'm like, oh. And then now all of a sudden I have to kind of rework it and go, okay, well, that's different. And it's also easier to forgive people that aren't in your life anymore because the story doesn't evolve or change. But forgiving someone who continues to wrong you, like for example, if you're married, or let's say, no, I take it back. Let's say you're divorced and you're sharing custody of children and your ex is literally the worst narcissistic asshole on the planet, like, and they continuously do things that violate your boundaries and bother you, like, that's not easy to try to unchain yourself from that. It's consistent abusive behavior. And there's a difference there too, because like you don't want to necessarily like, it gets a little bit complicated with like abuse and bad behavior, but it is a lot to ask somebody to like, how do you not let that eat you up when it is something that's consistent? So it is a practice. It's got to be done throughout your entire life.
Good for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you also, through everything you've been through, you got off the meds, started healing and working on yourself, getting better, and then you did a TED Talk.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. What was the TED Talk about?
It was about OCD and the power of storytelling.
Ooh, what's the power of storytelling to you in your eyes?
So I read a lot of research about how healing it can be to tell your story in its entirety because...
Really?
Yes, because what happens is people tend to tell the highlights and the lowlights. You know, they'll be like, well, this was happening. I got married and then I got divorced, you know, and it just... And that can kind of get rid of all the gray stuff a little bit. And then what happens, though, is that anything in the gray, like graduate high school, like that may not be a big thing for you. It might be, but it might not be. If it's gray, then you're so used to putting everything in the highs and lows that you go, well, it's got to go in one or the other. And then you end up funneling more into the low category, which can cloud your life. And you kind of think, my life sort of sucks because you've categorized it that way. So when you tell the whole story of like all the good things, the bad things, the neutral things, it makes it make a little bit more sense in a narrative way, which makes us feel like we have to categorize it a little bit less because we see it more as, you know, laid out in front of us, I guess. So I really love that idea. So I thought, okay, I will do that. And so I kind of used my TED Talk as a way to tell a little bit of my journey. And it was very healing to do it. And it was cool. It was actually at UNLV, so it was a TEDx talk. And I remember it was on my bucket list. I was like, I want to do a TED Talk. And then I looked it up. And they're like, submissions due in a week. And I was like, okay. And it was awesome because I was a student at the time, and I was the only student they picked. And they picked all these really amazing people. So I was like, this is so cool. And yeah, so it was 13 minutes. You know, you memorize like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then so that was the first time I'd done that. But they gave us like a speech coach, and that was really fun. And but I met people from all over the world. Like somebody came in from Scotland to do a talk, someone from England.
Wow.
Like really neat people. And actually, it was after that TED Talk, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm not the OCD girl after all. So I finished it. Something like that. And then the psychiatrist or psychologist comes up to me, and she had just done a talk on, I think, lying or dishonesty or something. And she goes, hey, I know you just gave a talk on OCD, but you don't have it. And I was like, what? And so she's like, here, take my card, call me in a week. Longest week ever. And I called her, and she went through all these questions with me about my relationships and like how I handle stress and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I kind of realized through answering her questions that, yeah, I do have difficulty with interpersonal relationships. She goes, okay, I think you have borderline. And that's the second time I'd heard that, because I heard it from that first therapist years ago. And I was like, oh no, this is before I knew it was PTSD. And so she referred me to a borderline therapist, and I went to go see her, but I'd actually OD'd that week. And so the only reason they let me out of the hospital after ODing.
OD'd on what?
Pills. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So like pills and alcohol, but mostly pills. So like,
What kind of pills?
I don't really know. Like I opened up my cabinet, and so it was literally all the pills I had. It was a mix of like benzos, painkillers.
What was going on?
Antibiotics. I had been severely triggered by perceived rejection. And so, yeah, this is so relatable, I'm sure. I had gone out with this guy, and I really liked him because he was like a DJ and so cool. And so
He's still a DJ now?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
But then like, and I thought it was going somewhere. Like I thought we were gonna, but because we were basically just in his car. Like we hadn't left my driveway yet. Like, you know, and I thought we were going to go out, but we didn't. He's like, you know, I'm actually really tired, and I felt super rejected. So, and that was just too much for me. I was absolutely triggered. And so I opened my cabinet. Like, well, actually, first I went and I just drank as much as I could find. And then I started self-harming. And normally that would work to calm me down, but it didn't. So then I looked through my cabinet and I literally grabbed every pill I had. So when we counted later, I think it was like 60 randos. I don't know what they were. So, but it was enough to where I was hallucinating and I couldn't walk or anything. And so my dad took me to the doctor and they said, you got to go to the hospital because she's on another planet. So we get there. Sorry, I'm laughing because it's funny. Like the next part's funny. But we got to the hospital and the doctor was like, look, I'm going to admit you to psych for a couple days. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet, but I'm okay. You know? And he's like, no, I'm not offering, like, you have to go. And my dad's like, I'm going to get the mayor on the phone. Like, so ridiculous.
Does he know the mayor?
Yes. And so then it's probably true, but it's just so like theatrical.
Yeah.
But then I remember I didn't want to go. So like when he had walked away and I was on the gurney by myself, I got up and like I went to the bathroom. Oh, I ripped it out and then decided to hide in the bathroom. And so, because they'll never find me in there.
Never.
And so,
yeah, good spot.
So they come in, and I'm like, and I was super high. So I'm like, how did you find me? And she's like, I followed your trail of blood. And I was like, rats. I was there for a few days, and then I got released. But they only agreed to release me because my dad had said, look, she has an appointment with a new therapist, like, and that's going to be better care than here, because they had put me in psych and they said I'd have to be there for 2 weeks because they're, the resources, they're like, we don't have a state nurse to come by and do this check off for you. And that was horrible to me because like they handcuffed me to the bed. I felt super scared, and they did not treat me as kindly as I would have liked, because it's sort of like, wow, the vibe I got was, you did this to yourself, and now we have to take care of you instead of taking care of people that need it because they can't help it. But it was that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So, and really in that place, you really just need compassion because like it seems like it's in your control, but it's like you're so on another planet emotionally with that kind of dysregulation. At least I was. So I got released and I got into therapy, and she's like, look, if you're going to do this, you can't have any alcohol. And I was like, okay. And she goes, yeah, you got to be completely sober from everything. And then we're going to work on your emotional regulation. And I was like, okay. And it was fantastic. Like, we didn't really address the trauma stuff because at that time I still thought I had BPD. But I learned so much about how to tolerate my feelings, the tools I could use if I got emotionally swept up, and I stopped self-harming. It was amazing, like really effective therapy for me. So I forget the original question, but here, yeah.
Me too.
Anyways.
Oh no, that was good. That was good information. The TED Talk. We started the TED Talk. TED Talk turned into mayor on the phone.
So funny.
It reminded me of there's this podcast, and the guy on the podcast was telling the host how he tried to commit suicide. He was like, yeah, man, I took a bunch of vitamins and I tried to OD, and the guy was like, what'd you do? Just get better?
Oh.
Like you imagine hella Flintstone vitamins. Just I'm ending it tonight. Sorry, that's not funny. I don't play with suicide. I don't want people to, whatever, dude. I don't care no more. I'm
allowed to laugh about it because of what I went through. So.
Yeah, and I'm here. I can laugh with you. Like I can't let you laugh alone.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want you to feel judged.
Thank you.
Yeah. I read that within communication also somewhere, that sometimes when we laugh, even though something's not funny, we're laughing to engage and make them feel supported.
Yes. It's so healing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when we think about self-care, like we think of, taking a bath, face masks and like yoga and breathing and like green it's very productive shit. It's a lot of work. But honestly, there's no better self-care than laughing. Like nothing will get your stress down faster than laughing.
Yeah.
So
especially with the right people, you get you just cracking about the most dumbest stuff.
Yeah.
Back to your point before we'll finish here in a few minutes. I think what you said was very powerful about storytelling, and that's why I part of the reason I started to do my podcast and have guests on and tell their story. Because for me, when I went on my very first podcast, it was to tell my story. And the way you broke it down was perfect because that's kind of how I would tell it. Just the high, the low, no, I didn't know how. But then as I was telling it and hearing it, me say it, I'm like, wow. So then I went to another podcast, telling a little more. And there were certain points when I was telling my story where I would just gloss over things quickly because I'm so used to it.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I did this and this. And the guy was like, hold on, wait. Circle back. You just said, like, that's not just some easy, situation. But you're so used to it and you kind of don't think of it that way.
Right.
Told my story more and more. And that's why on my podcast, I like having guests on that have their story and are willing to share because from my experience, it can become sense healing.
Yeah.
And almost reveal things you forgot about, remind you how the things you've overcome, the things that almost broke you, the things that just, it's wild sometimes as humans, the things we forget because a lot of life happens in a short amount of time. Especially if you're lucky enough to live a longer life, you'll forget what you did at 17, 18, 23, 26, 31. And you can look back like, damn, at 30, I was doing fucking TED Talk, ODing over fucking Brad, the DJ. Like,
I love that.
What was his name?
Trying to remember.
Oh, damn, Connor?
No, it was short. It was like initials. Like, it was like
JD.
It was something like
PJ,
that. Yeah,
AJ.
yeah, something like that.
Damn you, AJ. Why don't you call her back? Sheesh. You missed out on a good doctor. Probably DJing somewhere.
I know, right?
Weird and sketch.
It's so weird.
Yeah. Afters. Afters, downtown Vegas, DJing.
Right?
We'll finish up here. I have a few questions. Okay, for you, what are 2 to 3 supplements you would recommend anybody who's listening to this add to their life? The basics, nothing crazy if they have all these issues, but like just 3 you think are staples you should have.
Okay. I'm probably not gonna answer this the way you want, but I'll try.
I don't have no way.
Okay. I would say everyone minerals because you can take it with any medication and everyone is deficient. We are more mineral deficient as a culture than vitamin deficient. We're all getting purified water now, no minerals. Our soil is dead. Like we are just not getting the minerals. So we all could stand to get some minerals in. Number 2. I would say this is really, it's hard because I'm going through the list in my head of all the supplements and then different medications and stuff. Because a lot of them do interact and a lot of conditions, like you couldn't take something. Like, for example, if you had a certain gene mutation or if you have hypertension, you might want to avoid different things, make it actually worse. Because supplements, we think of them as additive medicine, meaning they make you better, and they do, but sometimes they can actually make things a lot worse. So I'm going to say spirituality.
Okay.
Like, I think so many people are spiritually deficient, like myself included. I can tell when I get like really sad and I feel existential and bored, I know I'm missing something. And I'm not a religious person. I don't go to a facility at all. Like, it's not my vibe. But I do have a very strong connection, with my sense of a higher power and what that means to me and where I feel that, and hugely feel that in nature. Like, it's a very amazing space for me to go where I feel connected to myself and everything all at once. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of us miss because, we get so stuck in our houses and we get stuck on social media and we're hyper independent as a culture. And especially if you're dealing with addiction, you tend to feel very alone and you have to do it all yourself because you were trained to feel that way. So it's scary to feel like you can rely or that things are going to be okay or could work out. So I think supplementing that would be can be really healing.
Spirituality. I agree. I like that.
I'm going to go with that one. And then number 3, I'm going to say water. I know it's boring, but like, here's the thing. Like, people are so dehydrated Like people are so dehydrated. And it's not because we don't drink enough water. It's because we don't have enough minerals. And water follows the minerals. So if you don't have minerals, you're going to pee it out. So we don't get enough. Also, most of us have really dry foods. So we have like tons of carbohydrates and a lot of breads. That soaks up your water. Like you don't get that. Like it becomes part of digestion. You don't get the free water. Also, I would say we don't get enough fruits. Like you need your watery foods. Like you need your melons, you need your peaches. Like you need watery foods. It will help
Cucumber,
tomato, great ones. Like they contain your flavonoids, your vitamins, like all those things that are so important to your body can use it in its form it wants to use it in. Because you got living water and then you have like not living water. So I think I would say water. Like plus we live in the desert. But everyone everywhere needs to get hydrated.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll drink some water on the way out.
Do it.
As we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you, do you have any quote you live by?
Oh,
that you'd like to share? What is it?
It's a Louise Hay quote, and she said, "It's only a thought, and a thought can be changed." And I think about that all the time because it's so easy to identify with our feelings and believe that they actually mean more than they do. And sometimes they do mean a lot. Like they are a compass, to tell you like, hey, you don't like this person, like shouldn't be dating them. Your body's reacting. That's true. But sometimes like if we get a little OCD or anxiety, and we're getting and then it's easy to tell ourselves like, oh, I should be able to fix this. I should be able to solve this. What's wrong with me? Like those thoughts need to change and they can change, which is the amazing part. So if we can change our thoughts, we can change a lot about what we believe and how we feel. So, yeah, that one.
It's fire.
Thank you.
I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Julia Britz, for coming on the Bamboo Season podcast. I appreciate your story. It was amazing. Your energy, your personality. I love what you do. You're helping people in a natural, normal, it's holistic, a good word to say?
Yeah, it's a great word.
Holistic way. The hippie doctor.
Yeah.
You should change your Instagram to that. That'd be kind of cool.
The hippie doctor.
Hippie doctor. That'd be... There's all kinds of other doctors, and it's carnivore doctor.
Yeah, it's true.
He wasn't even he wasn't even MD. I think he was a psychology doctor. But anyways, neither here nor there. I don't want to debate. All right, you guys, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Bamboo Season podcast. In the description, I'm going to tag her Instagram, also her TED Talk, so you can go hear her talk about OCD and the power of storytelling. I'm going to leave you with a good one today. This one's good, real good. It's not a word, well it is, but it's a bit of information to help you. When you're not feeling your best and you're going towards your vices, alcohol, porn, food, toxic relationships, it could be because your feel-good chemicals are low. Your dopamine, your serotonin, your GABA, those are low. And I'm gonna give you a tool to help you raise those naturally. It's an acronym that I made. S.O.B.R.I.E.T.Y. S is for sit in stillness. So sit with yourself, with your thoughts, by yourself. Observe your breathing. So do some breath work. You could ask ChatGPT how to do that. Be with your tribe. So be with your people, find your community. You need that connection with people. Replenish. So make sure you're getting the right food, the right liquids in your body. Initiate creativity. So do something out of the ordinary, a new hobby, play the guitar, learn how to tap dance, something to stimulate your mind. Exercise, time in nature, and the last one's why, say yes to change. So all these things, if you do these, will help improve those feel-good chemicals to your body that might help you get rid of the alcohol, the weed, the porn, the toxic relationships, the bad DJ you tried to date. 2 words, keep growing.